Greetings and salutations, YouTubers. This is Illafan85 back today with my latest video. This one I'm definitely kind of considering a sort of special treat, if you will, because I wanted to go ahead and actually discuss my personal introduction to Godzilla, you know, how I actually became a fan, of course, of the giant monster. The reason being for this is because we're just under a week away from this year's G-Fest 26, which I will be attending. I'm really uber excited about it, folks. You know, this is going to be my first time ever attending the convention. It very possibly is going to be my only time I ever get to go, so this is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime event. But for such a huge, you know, Godzilla and Kaiju fan like myself, this is something that I was really amped up for, really anticipating. Definitely, you know, a bucket list item that's very high up on my bucket list, you know, of things to do. So, you know, this is just something that I was really excited about, and so I figured, as like I said, as sort of a prelude to it, I wanted to go ahead and share, you know, just my experience of my personal introduction to Godzilla, which, as you can see here, did actually come from none other than TNT'S MonsterVision, Godzilla Bash 94. I don't know how many of you actually do remember TNT'S MonsterVision. This is way, you know, back in the day, back when I was a you know, little nugget there. So basically, MonsterVision on TNT, it started in June of 1991, and it ran all the way until September of 2000. They ended up canceling it. I guess the network itself just wanted to kind of change its image around, which it even, you noticed in the later years of MonsterVision, that started happening, the way that it was presented and all, and then eventually the show was canceled completely, which was a real shame, because I absolutely loved MonsterVision. I grew up watching it, not just for the Godzilla marathons that they had, you know, numerous times. They had Godzilla movies and Godzilla marathons in the course of MonsterVision's run, but they, you know, they had plenty of other monster movies, sci-fi movies, horror movies, all kinds of cool stuff. I loved watching all that stuff. You know, it was kind of how I was introduced to other things, like some of the Ray Harryhausen movies, some of like the Sinbad movies. I love all that stuff. I'm a huge fan, and I'm hoping in the future to maybe make some videos regarding like some Ray Harryhausen movies, etc. You know, as time goes on here. You know, I want to digress a bit. Obviously, I don't want to stray too much, but I do want to give just a little bit of, you know, backstory info on MonsterVision itself. You know, before I really get into it, I'm not sure how long this video is going to run, so I kind of just want to be upfront about that, because I know I tend to carry on a bit, which I do apologize. But again, I love Godzilla, you know, so much. I love giant monsters so much. It's been such a huge part of my life, as you can see here, for many years. And another big thing about this is that Godzilla Bash 94 is actually 25 years ago. So that's sort of a you know, that's sort of another sort of milestone as well, that I've been a true Godzilla fan for nearly that long. I'll say nearly because it's not, you know, it's the year of, but this bash aired a little bit later. I'm going to get to that, you know, in a moment, a little bit later in the year, 94. But, you know, just going back to some of the stuff about MonsterVision itself, like I said, you know, I just, I really loved MonsterVision. Obviously, it's what got me into Godzilla, like I said, and numerous other sorts of things as well that I became a fan of. It was a shame TNT, obviously, they changed their image, the whole, you know, drama thing, blah blah, so I haven't really been too much of a fan of TNT pretty much ever since the days MonsterVision ended. But, you know, that's just my personal sentiment towards it. I will, you know, watch sometimes, you know, because I am an NBA fan, so they still at least have NBA on TNT, which I still like. So I'll keep track of that. And but nonetheless, though, as far as MonsterVision's run itself, basically we've had different sort of eras in MonsterVision itself as far as like hosting duties and whatnot. This Godzilla Bash '94 in particular, where I became a fan. This is actually because I know a lot of fans who are familiar with MonsterVision are, of course, familiar with its most famous host, that being Joe Bob Briggs, who I actually did have the pleasure of meeting at Spooky Empire, which is a horror convention in Orlando, Florida, or at least it's been in Orlando. I think they're changing locations now, but anyway, though, my first time ever attending that convention, he was there. I went to his panel and got to meet him in person when I went to his line. He was really, really awesome. Definitely love Joe Bob Briggs. And I do understand that he did commission to sort of bring MonsterVision back in a sort of different, not under, I don't believe it's under the MonsterVision title, but I know Shudder TV picked up some sort of MonsterVision-esque thing with him that he's hosting. I'm not too familiar with it. I haven't actually seen it. If any of you have seen it all, please share your thoughts on it with me. If it really is like MonsterVision, if it really, does bring that vibe. It sounds like it does from what I read up on it, but like I said, I just haven't seen it, so I'm not really familiar with it. But as far as MonsterVision itself goes, Joe Bob Briggs, like I said, he became host of it back in 1996. So again, this was almost 2 years before he became the host, and of course he was the host up until nearly the end of its run in 2000. So so obviously, again, he's a staple with MonsterVision. But again, this is the pre-Joe Bob Briggs era, and this isn't even like the original style that they had when they did this Godzilla Bash, because the original style back in 1991, I don't know if any of you remember. I'm familiar. MonsterVision had that like claymation moon-shaped character that was essentially the host of it. So that was what they started with for the first couple years that they had MonsterVision. And then I remember Penn and Teller hosted it for a brief while, and then they went after that they went to this sort of voiceover narrator as the host, which they had for essentially a few years up until Joe Bob Briggs took over the hosting duties. So Godzilla Bash '94 fell into that voiceover narrating host era. So that's when this kind of fell in line with. And like I said, this was my true introduction to Godzilla. So now really jumping into this, how I became a fan. A few years before this, I remember, and I was, because I'm originally from New York, when I was about, I'm trying to think if I was about 3 or 4 years old at the time. There was a couple Godzilla movies I remember on TV in New York. I do remember it was obviously the original version of Godzilla King of the Monsters, from the 50s, and then followed up by Godzilla's Revenge. And I remember bits and pieces of it. I don't believe at that time that I watched the movies in their entirety, but I do remember watching bits and pieces of them. But it wasn't really what really sparked me into getting into it. I was kind of young at the time, and like I said, I just didn't have enough to go off of to really get into it. What truly got me into the whole kaiju / giant monster craze was actually King Kong. That was my first introduction, my true way of getting into the whole giant monster thing. I was about 5 or 6 at the time, and again, it was on TNT. I don't know if it was MonsterVision or if they were just airing like a King Kong night, but this was back in I'm trying to think if it was like 91 or something like that, 1991 as in. But I remember, though, they had the original 1933 King Kong, followed up by King Kong Lives, and then Son of Kong. And that really got me into King Kong himself. you know, and prior to this too, I should also digress a bit, because prior to this too, I was always into dinosaurs and stuff like that. I remember visiting, you know, like the Natural History Museum and just falling in love with dinosaurs and everything. So it kind of all fell in line, and that was when I was about, you know, again about three-ish or so. You know, and I even had like that T-Rex, you know, inflatable doll thing that they, I don't know if any of you kind of remember any of those. This is way back when, so many years ago, folks. You know, but I do remember that, you know, having one of those. Unfortunately, it got ripped up, so I don't have it anymore, but I do remember that. And then, of course, like I said, King Kong, really, as far as the giant monster thing, that's really what sparked me to get into it. And a few years after I saw those King Kong movies, and of course became, you know, a fan, obviously, and all that, and obviously remember watching the '76 King Kong as well, you know, which I loved all the King Kong movies. And again, King Kong's still one of my favorite monsters of all time. You know, as far as like giant monsters / kaiju go, he'd be number 2 behind Godzilla. So that still to this day, you know, remains the case for me. But again, though, you know, so Godzilla himself, though, since I only had that limited exposure and didn't really recall too much other than I kind of liked him, but I just didn't have enough to really go off of. So that's kind of where, back, like I said, in 1994, and this was actually November of '94, Thanksgiving Day weekend, is when TNT's MonsterVision decided to host what they call Godzilla Bash '94, which again was a night of Godzilla films. And this was my true introduction to Godzilla, and how I truly became a fan of the kaiju himself, the big green one, or not the big, you know, the big G, I should say. So, but so basically the lineup consists of, it started at 8 o'clock that night, the lineup, and I'm not, you know, looking back on it, because I had to kind of re-look up the lineup just to make sure on everything. So it's kind of weird the way that they did it. So they started, like I said, it started at 8 o'clock, and I believe it ran until like 5 in the morning or something, so it was an overnight thing, essentially. You know, but they started with Mothra versus Godzilla. Then they had Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. Then they had Godzilla's Revenge. Then they had Terror of Mechagodzilla. And then they finished up the night with Godzilla King of the Monsters, you know, the original incarnation of that. So that was the lineup that night. The reason why I get confused is because obviously, you know, being a, you know, I was a kid at the time, I wasn't, you know, allowed to stay up late to watch it, but my dad, you know, and you know, may he rest in peace, because unfortunately he passed away back in 2010. But another thing that made it so special for me was that he actually, you know, recorded the movies for me back on VHS tape. So if any of you remember, you know, VHS, VCRs, and all that. So he recorded what he could for me, you know, with one of those 6-hour tapes. But the way he did it, it was interesting. I guess because he did want, you know, me to have exposure to Godzilla King of the Monsters. So I believe what he did, because of the way the lineup was, he actually skipped a couple hours ahead on the tape itself, so that he could you know, have Godzilla King of the Monsters as the first film on that tape. So he went and recorded it, you know, when that aired, and at the point that was skipped from at the beginning. I'm trying to hopefully make sense of this. Is when he started recording Mothra versus Godzilla. Then he had Godzilla versus Monster Zero, and I guess he managed to get about half of Godzilla's Revenge. So I guess the tape was able to go over a bit. Just unfortunately couldn't record the whole movie. So you know, but then it started with Godzilla King of the Monsters. So, like I said, so obviously he went in the middle of the night to record that after he skipped over a couple hours at the beginning of the VHS tape to leave enough room to record that movie and then start recording Mothra versus Godzilla a couple hours into it. So I'm trying to explain it correctly if I can, which I guess I didn't really realize that he did that until later on, because I didn't really realize what the actual lineup was. I thought it for sure started with Godzilla King of the Monsters, which honestly would make sense. You know, you would think that they would go in order of the movie's release. But that's the way he did it. So I mean, that was really cool of him to do that, and I definitely appreciate it. So at least I did have the true exposure to Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I had that first on the tape, the way that he recorded it. So then I had that in its entirety, and then Mothra versus Godzilla, then Godzilla versus Monster Zero, and then half of Godzilla's Revenge. And of course, remembering my very vague callbacks, like I said, to when I was about 3 or 4, seeing Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla's Revenge, it really sparked me. And the thing was, I know the sort of the popular opinion with fans is that they're not a fan of Godzilla's Revenge, aka All Monsters Attack, but I happen to really like the movie. You know, I'm sure you guys will be not too thrilled with me knowing that, but I've just always had fond memories of it. You can call it a guilty pleasure if you want, but I just, you know, because it was such an early film that I have memories of, is why it kind of has a special place in my heart. Plus, you know, just to be honest with you, I never really had a lot of friends growing up. I was always kind of a loner, you know, and even to this day, you know, that's still kind of the case, which I'm okay with. I don't really mind. You know, like I said, I've just always been used to being sort of a loner anyway. But, you know, but of course, too, back when I was a kid, I was also bullied a lot. You know, and plus, obviously, becoming such a huge Godzilla fan, having that as such a huge part of my life, you know, my childhood up until this day, and will forever be a huge part of my life, that I'll be a huge fan of Godzilla and Kaiju. So I felt that I really could relate to the character of Ichiro. And that's basically why I happen to really appreciate the movie and really, really like it a lot. Like, it's not low on my list at all in my rankings. If any of you have seen it, it's actually fairly high up, maybe a little higher than it should be, but again, it's just personal sentiment. So it was a shame I didn't get the full movie of it though on this recording, but obviously my dad did the best he could. I think he only had the one tape to go off of at the time, so it kind of is what it is. But obviously though too, you know, wanting to be able to have Godzilla King of the Monsters recorded, you know, especially trying to really get into it, it kind of takes priority, you know what I mean? So, so he certainly did the best he could, and I certainly appreciate it. And my dad, over the years, you know, back again when VHS was still a thing, he's recorded many Godzilla movies for me, and you know, other giant monster movies, and of course, you know, MST3K. If any of you remember Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is one of, if not my favorite show of all time. I absolutely love it, and thank goodness for Roku. Any of you have it, the Pluto TV app, which has like over, I don't know, has like a couple hundred channels on that Pluto TV app itself on Roku, and one of those channels is an all MST3K channel, so I get a lot of fun watching that. That Roku, it's just amazing. Especially too, they got like the channel 62, which has all the, you know, all the Japanese-made Godzilla films on it, and it's got essentially all the Gamera films, or just about all of them, on there, plus other apps that have sci-fi and horror stuff and other giant monster stuff. So definitely love the Roku, you know, as far as stuff nowadays go. But back then, obviously, we had what we had. At this point in time too, in our area, SciFi Channel was not available in our area, only if you had Dish Network, and obviously we had cable. So later on, back in the late 90s, is when they finally gave us SciFi Channel, which I was really excited about. And obviously this is SciFi Channel back in the day, back when it was really cool, back when it was actually spelled SCI-FI, you know, not SYFY, which sounds like sci-fi or something. I don't know. But anyway, though, back in that day, I loved it because the other thing, too, was, which I wanted to touch on as well, SciFi Channel always used to have Godzilla marathons, which I know, or at least I came to know, because I would oftentimes go up to New York to maybe, you know, to visit my grandmother, you know, like over the summer and whatnot, and she, obviously, there they had the SciFi Channel, and I lucked out to actually be there at the right time when they had Godzilla movies showing, you know, when they had their Godzilla marathon, which my first true exposure to that was the following year after my first real exposure, which again was the Godzilla Bash '94. So in the summer of '95, I got to watch a little bit of that Godzilla marathon on the SciFi Channel, which was definitely awesome. And I remember my cousin was also visiting there at the time, and he was younger than me, and then he, you know, when I got my grandma to put on SciFi Channel so I can watch Godzilla, then he started becoming a fan, so I got him into Godzilla, and he's become a huge fan. In fact, to this day, my cousin's still a huge fan of Godzilla, and always will be, so it's kind of cool that I got him into it. You know, and over the years too, I got a couple of my other friends into Godzilla and everything. So certainly, you know, try to do my part to promote the big G. So because again, I love him so much, always have and always will. So this was sort of like, you know, just kind of going into a lot of like my childhood, my exposure of it. So again, I love that lineup that night. Again, I got to watch what I did, which again, that for Godzilla Bash '94 itself was, I personally got to see from the VHS recording anyways, which I still have my tape, by the way. I have all those tapes. So I still have, again, I watched that night was, for me, ended up being on the tape, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, and part of Godzilla's Revenge. And then I lucked out, so obviously I didn't get to see Terror of Mechagodzilla, but I did luck out, though, because the following year, at the end of 1995, MonsterVision did another Godzilla marathon. This time they did it during the day, so I got to watch a bunch of it, but I still wanted to have stuff recorded on tape just so I can have it for my, you know, like my own movie collection. So they had all these movies again on there, so my dad went ahead and recorded Godzilla's Revenge in its entirety, plus Terror of Mechagodzilla, which aired after that. And as a bonus treat, that night for that New Year's marathon, because it was like a big New Year's marathon, it wasn't just Godzilla, it was all kinds of other giant monsters and everything as well. So after Terror of Mechagodzilla aired, then they had the original Rodan, which aired, and so he recorded that for me as well, and that was my first time ever getting to see Rodan, who is one of my favorite kaiju of all time as well. So that was really awesome. Again, like I said, I still have all those tapes. And then, like I said, with SciFi Channel's marathons, back before we had SciFi Channel in this area, which again we didn't get until like the late 1990s. But my grandma, though, because they still had those marathons every year, so she went ahead and recorded marathon. She recorded like each night they had a Godzilla / kaiju movie on. So she recorded she recorded each night for me on the SciFi Channel, so I got to watch, from that, so again, more movies for my collection, obviously, mainly ones that I didn't get to see, which was really exciting because a couple that I was super anticipating that I got from that collection that my grandma recorded for me from SciFi Channel. They had King Kong versus Godzilla, and they also had Destroy All Monsters, and those two were like the two at that time. This was back like in the mid to late 90s era, when she recorded that marathon for me. that was the first time I ever got to see those, and those were probably the two most anticipated Godzilla movies for me at that time, you know. And then, of course, there were other ways that I got exposure to the movies other than, you know, recording on VHS or watching on TV. This, you know, again, back in this era in the 1990s, these are the days when we had Blockbuster Video and Video Express, so I'd be renting Godzilla movies to be able to watch more of them and all, and definitely loved that. I really loved those days. I remembered like it'd be like a Friday or Saturday night. You know, my parents would take me, you know, either just me alone or if I was with a friend, you know, staying over or whatever, we'd go to Blockbuster and then I'd, you know, rent like Godzilla or monster movies, whatever, along with, you know, some video games and stuff as well that they had. And I remember too specifically, I believe it was Video Express, back when that was still around. That was my first time in the 90s getting exposed to the Godzilla Monster of Monsters game for the NES, which I'm personally a huge fan of. I love that game. You know, it's one of the only, you know, like true Godzilla side-scroller games, you know what I mean? Where it's not just, yeah, I like fighting games, but to me, fighting games, just personal sentiment, they kind of get repetitive and redundant after a while, and it gets a little boring to me. I prefer the more platformer adventure style games, you know, because there's just more that you can do. And granted, Godzilla Monster of Monsters is not the best executed because it's a side scroller, but you know, very repetitive, the stages in it and all, but it still is fun to progress through. And of course, though, you still have to fight the enemy kaiju along the way, you know, from Planet X's Legion of Monsters. So I had a lot of fun with that game. Was glad not glad, I was super excited the first time I finally beat it. You know, and it's a game to this day that I still play quite often. It's a game that I happen to really love. Especially for its sort of uniqueness as a Godzilla game. Is really awesome. But anyways, I've made a separate video about that altogether, so if any of you are curious that are not familiar with the game, please feel free to check that out. So I know I'm going off on a lot of tangents here. Like I said, I just kind of wanted to discuss like my earlier days as a Godzilla fan, which again did truly start with TNT's MonsterVision Godzilla Bash '94. Again, this was the pre-Joe Bob Briggs era of MonsterVision, which I know not a lot of people remember that, because a lot of people who are familiar with MonsterVision are familiar with Joe Bob Briggs hosting it. But again, he didn't start hosting it until, you know, about 5 years after it started its run. So like I said, this was the time when they had that voiceover narrator as the host. So, but it was really cool. I love the way they did it. This was my, you know, Godzilla Bash '94. This was also my first time being exposed to the Blue Oyster Cult Godzilla song, which they had with that sort of montage video playing and everything. If any of you are familiar with Godzilla Bash '94, that remember that was so freaking awesome. I loved it. I fell in love with the song right away, and I just, oh my goodness, I just loved everything about it. And the you know, the bumpers that they had, you know, for the Godzilla Bash and everything, they were just all really cool. I just remember all of it. And there are some posts available on YouTube, I know, that have like the bumpers and the song and everything from Godzilla Bash '94. So if any of you want to look any of those up, I have seen them on available on YouTube, I should say. So, you know, again, so I kind of just wanted to go into all this here. Trying to think of what else I wanted to add. Obviously, again, I don't rehearse. I just kind of think of what I want to say and just kind of, you know, go crazy, if you will. I know I'm reaching almost a half an hour. Again, I do apologize. I know, like I said, I always tend to ramble on, but, you know, I just love Godzilla and Kaiju so much that I love being able to talk about it. And like I said, so I just kind of wanted to go into how I was truly introduced to Godzilla and what made me a fan. And I really loved MonsterVision, like I said, and Godzilla Bash '94, I just remember it was just so so freaking awesome. And it's what, like I said, it's what truly got me into Godzilla and made me a fan. And then of course it grew from there. I got to see more and more of the movies over the years. Obviously now I've seen them all up until the latest one, the 2019 version of Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I really liked a lot. Definitely excited for Godzilla vs. Kong next year. I can't wait to see what they do with it. Any prediction that I would have on it, I would think it might be like a Batman v Superman style film where the Godzilla and Kong are at odds at first, but then have to team up to take on a greater threat. Because they're both basically portrayed as protagonist kaiju. So, I mean, that's just my assumption, but a lot of people have been kind of assuming that. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or not. But in the interim, though, like I said, I'm really, really uber excited that I'm going to be in Chicago, this coming week, and be at G-Fest for my first and, like I said, very possibly only time that I ever get to attend the convention. So I want to make the best of it. I'll be there the Saturday of the convention, because obviously when I go to conventions, I usually just go one day. So that Saturday the 13th is when I'll be there. If any of you are going to be there, please let me know. I would definitely, love to meet anybody, chat about any Godzilla stuff or anything like that. I know I'm not a big time YouTuber, but still, though, I just enjoy being able to meet and talk to fellow, Godzilla and kaiju fans. I'm really sad. My buddy Godzilla Fan Freaks, he had previously let me know he's not going to be there, so I was disappointed about that. I know he's going to be running his own sort of Godzilla convention in Tucson, Arizona. I want to say in August, if I remember correctly. So if any of you are going to be in that area, certainly, feel free to look that up and check it out, because it sounds like he's putting together something really nice. I wish I lived closer by, that I could be able to go to it, but unfortunately not. And it's a shame because I'd really like to meet him in person. He's what really inspired me to really get into the figure reviews of of my Godzilla collection and whatnot. I really love what he does. He doesn't monetize his videos either, like I don't. He kind of does it for fun. So him and I were chatting before, so we're kind of both on the same page there. Hopefully I'll get to do something with him, at some point. If you're watching, Godzilla Fan Freaks, so, definitely, keep me posted on anything like that. And again, man, I'm really sorry that you're not going to be able to be at G-Fest, because I was really anticipating being able to meet you before I found out you couldn't make it. So, but, he's definitely awesome. Please check out his channel. He's I consider, as far as figure reviews go and whatnot, he's definitely a master of his craft, because he's been doing this for years and years, and I just kind of try to model some of what I do after him, but he really knows his stuff. I'm an amateur just doing the best I can, but definitely, though, he really was one of my big inspirations as far as that goes. And, just him along with some other people that I like on YouTube. Obviously, you've got like the big timers like Cinemasker, the angry video game nerd and all that. So him along with them, that's really what inspired me to get into the YouTube video creating and to sort of do what I do. I know mostly what I do is figure reviews, and that's going to continue to be the case. But, there are some variations where I like to do some other stuff, like with this video in particular, along with some like the game discussion and movie discussion videos that I do. Unfortunately, I don't have the tech to do like clips playing while I'm talking about it and this and that. But so I kind of do what I do with the images and PowerPoint, but I make it work the best I can, though. And I definitely, like I said, want to do more of these type of videos. And probably for my next one, I'm thinking I might do something. I want it to be something regarding, my experience from G-Fest. Obviously I have some collectibles that are on my list that I want to try and get there at G-Fest. My number one target is the SH Monster Arts Burning Godzilla. We'll see if I can get a hold of it there and how much it's going to cost, because eBay, I'm seeing it going for a few $100s. I really don't want to spend that much. But other videos I've seen from people who've gotten stuff at G-Fest tend to say that you can get better deals there than you can get online on eBay and whatnot. So I'm going to kind of see what I can find there. But that's definitely one that I might get, maybe, or one that I want to get. It's the one that I want to get the most of, or the most, I should say. But definitely some Gashapon, a couple of Gashapon figures, maybe figures, I should say, that I'm thinking of that I might want to get. And a couple other things, but we'll see what I can actually get. So I might want to do something on my haul from G-Fest, and maybe, obviously I want to take some pictures at the convention too, so maybe I can do like a sort of slide thing as well to kind of go with that. So that's kind of what I'm aiming at for my next video. I'm thinking it probably won't be next weekend, since I will be out of town. So I would say maybe look for it by the weekend after next weekend, so a couple weeks out before I get my next video up. But I do want to do something from my experience from G-Fest, though. Like I said, this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime event probably for me. I'm really amped up for it. I can't wait. And again, so I just thought that this video, though, this week would be sort of a good prelude to it, and to kind of cue you all into how I essentially became a Godzilla fan. I'm sorry I carried on so long. I didn't really anticipate on the video being over half an hour like it's been, but certainly a lot to talk about, and I could go on for hours and hours, trust me. So I'm trying to consolidate for you the best I can. But I'm thinking about it. I think that should about conclude everything that I wanted to discuss here. So with that, so folks, that does pretty much bring us to the end of the video. I definitely would like to thank you so much for watching. If you would like to subscribe, please feel free to do so. If you would like to like and or comment on any of my videos, please feel free to do so as well. And certainly, any of you, I would love to hear from you, your first exposure, your first true exposure, whatever, that got you into Godzilla and Kaiju, in general. I really want to hear from you guys, your experiences with that. And any of you who have been to G-Fest before or are planning to go this year or whatever, please let me know as well your experiences there. If any of you are going to be there this year, certainly would like to say hello. I'd be more than happy to do that. I'm really amped up for the convention. I want to be there. Like I said, since it's only going to be the one day, the 13th, I want to be there wire to wire, when it opens, and then up till late at night. I was looking at the schedule. I know that they're going to have some movies and stuff they're going to show, so I definitely would like to be there for some of that at nighttime. So definitely want to make it count the day that I'm going to be there. But anyways, though, like I said, that does pretty much wrap it up, though, folks. So until after G-Fest, just remember, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, you be good to yourselves, and sayonara.